we are ready to start. Good evening and welcome to our annual Economy for All event. You can clap again. We're excited to come together with you to step into 2026 with clarity about our state's economic outlook and with the conviction that together we can not only imagine but craft an economy that makes people's lives better and more affordable through better public policy choices. I'm going to take this off. Awesome. If you are familiar with BTC, you may not know me. My name is Brianna Dean. I am the Organizational Advancement Coordinator. I've been around for a little over a year, and I've enjoyed just trying to develop the resources needed to craft an economy for all. I'm grateful that y'all came out tonight to be in community with us. Your partnership is really what sustains us through difficult times, and I think we can all agree this is a difficult time. So by working together, we can advance the economy that we need and deserve. As we gather in Durham, we acknowledge and honor those who came before us and who worked to shape an economy that values each of our humanity. So beginning with the Catawba, Shara, Eno, Lumbee, Occaneechi, Shakori, and Tuscarora tribes, peoples who were here first, and also the enslaved people of African descent whose unpaid labor in tobacco and cotton amassed great wealth for a select few white families. Yes. The factory workers, white, black, Latina, and indigenous who labored in unsafe conditions and pushed this city forward. To the activists and organizers, who fought for equal protection under the law, and the immigrants from across the globe who came to this city to live, work, and build businesses. The present-day workers at labs and universities, the teachers and child care providers, service workers and healthcare providers, entrepreneurs, organizers, and activists who are shaping what is possible. We acknowledge those who came before us and the uniqueness of this place and its history in helping us to build on the lessons, remember the progress, and acknowledge the people, black, white, and brown, indigenous, and immigrant, whose well-being must be centered in our work. Can we just honor everyone I just named? So we're grateful for the many people who made tonight possible. To our staff and our board, can y'all just wave? I won't make you stand up. To our host committee, y'all can also wave Labor South, North Carolina Poor People's Campaign, and the North Carolina AFL-CIO. Thank y'all so much. And to you, our guests and neighbors, you're showing up to demand that policymakers choose people over corporations, to demonstrate the central role of people and workers in fueling our economy, and to dispel the myth that we can't afford to do better. Thank you for being with us tonight. Now let's get our program moving. Y'all, I'm about to cry. Whew. Let's get our program moving. I'm excited now to share and welcome to the stage our Executive Director, Alexandra Forder-Sirota, who will share a bit more about our work at BTC and introduce our keynote speaker. Y'all welcome Alexandra, my boss.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to use this because it helps me. It's so wonderful to be here. Thank you, Brianna, for that welcome. Thank you all for coming out this evening, even as we anticipate winter weather. I'm so grateful for our partners, our host committee, and our board who continue to join with us in demanding the policies we know will make people's lives better. Our work is certainly cut out for us, but I truly believe the North Carolina Budget and Tax Center was built for this moment, and that together in this pivotal year, we can still imagine and carve out the pathway to secure an economy for all. Our work at the Budget and Tax Center focuses on the ways that sharp analysis, trusted partnerships, and connecting more people to the policy process and connecting the dots across policy issues to show how policy choices deliver better outcomes can deliver a state where everyone can reach their full potential and thrive. We won't give up on the radical idea that things can be better for our future and our communities today. That in the face of a crisis of affordability, our elected leaders can pass a state budget that makes healthcare, housing, and childcare affordable, They can raise wages and workplace standards to keep up with those costs and to deliver well-being. We believe that every community from Wilson to Waynesville can have the supports to care for the people who live here, connect people to good jobs, and create the conditions to fulfill the promise of a representative, responsive democracy. It's essential to hold fast to these alternatives and be clear-eyed about what it will take for our state to make this a reality. We believe people power aligned to a common goal and ready to take action through shared analysis is critical. Tonight, our hope is that this event, Economy for All, creates opportunities for you to connect, deepen, and share work, and make a more affordable life possible for more people across our state. For more than a decade, North Carolina has been a testing ground for trickle-down economic theories that put tax cuts for the wealthy and big profitable corporations first, ahead of funding the public good that comes from quality public education, affordable childcare and housing, and accessible health care. We've tracked at BTC the devastation left in its wake, from unfunded programs and growing vulnerabilities to public health crises and disasters, to missed opportunities to prepare for major shifts in how we work and how our leaders govern. The cumulative threat to people's well-being and our democracy is real. It has made life less affordable, opportunities to get ahead further out of reach. It has created an economy that feels increasingly fragile for the very people who actually power it. We know that together we can demand the economy we need. After all, an economy for all doesn't happen by accident. It's built through deliberate policy choices, prioritization, and systems that put people first, not profit and big corporations. This evening, I'm excited to join with you in reflection and preparation for how we advance those policy choices that best deliver the economy we deserve. And I couldn't be more excited by the opportunity that we have to hear from a leading thinker and how we move past austerity to think about jobs, people, and the transformational policies that deliver well-being. Dr. Darrick Hamilton is a university professor, the Henry Cohen Professor of Economics and Urban Policy, and the founding director of the Institute on Race, Power, and Political Economy at the New School. He currently serves as the chief economist at the AFL-CIO. As one of the nation's foremost scholars, economists, and public intellectuals, Dr. Hamilton has brought forward visionary scholarship on the racial wealth gap and economic justice to craft bold policy proposals with elected leaders and advocates. In particular, his collaborative work on baby bonds and a federal job guarantee has showed the possibilities of policies not limited by status quo and neoliberal thinking. He is providing concrete pathways for policies to deliver on the promise of a better life. And in this moment when so much feels broken, Dr. Hamilton is showing us all that we can build something better. Please join me in welcoming Professor Dr. Darrick Hamilton to the stage and back to Durham, North Carolina.
What a warm, generous introduction. Thank you, Alexandra, and thank you to the entire team of the North Carolina Budget and Tax Center. It is a homecoming. I went to graduate school at University of North Carolina. Uh-oh, that might be, getting controversial. My mother's from North Carolina. My mother, my grandmother, I've lost them both, but I got a strong family lineage to North Carolina. And it's proud, but my professor is in the audience, Patrick Conway. He's right. I'm honored and proud to be able to stand up here and from a place that raised me. So that's important, and I got to acknowledge it, and it probably will hit me more later, or it might even hit me while I'm on stage. But I'm here to talk about way forward, an economy for all. I think this graphic right here captures it. Right now, we have a society in which we manage people. We manage poor people in particular. We socially isolate them. We manage them as if they're a surplus population. We engage in income maintenance rather than income mobility, so subsistence programs. We conscript them to our military. We incarcerate them en masse. And we engage in policies aimed at their fertility, reproduction, and family formation. What if we flip the relationship? Matter of fact, what if we start with the question, what is the purpose of an economy? I think if we ask that question, we might end up with, if you ask that, I'm going to pick on my professor at North Carolina. Obviously, it's not him personally. But in economics classes, we learn about the what, how, and to whom, but we don't ask the why. We don't ask, what is the purpose of an economy? If we ask that simple question, we might end up with outcomes like, well, I believe an economy should promote community and civic engagement. I believe it should promote self-determination, ingenuity and innovation, human flourishing, healthy and tranquil environments, and then here's the other point, it should center people and the environments in which we live. If that is the point, then why don't we flip the relationship so that we're investing in its most treasured resource, which is people? So rather than managing people, why don't we authentically invest in people? And if we think about a mechanism, we can label the term inclusive economic rights. But Alexandra talked about various programs, a baby bonds program, a federal job guarantee program, guaranteed income. These aren't simply charitable interventions, but rather investments in people's capacities. And fundamentally, I believe that when people are properly resourced, not only will they be productive, but they will generate positive macroeconomic multipliers that benefit themselves, their communities, and the economy overall. And also, fundamentally, centers on these type of outcomes, which I suspect enlightened people would define as what a purpose of an economy should yield. Right now, we have a common sense that's not that. And as a result, when we come up with policies, they're often swimming upstream. I think we need to work on vision as well as policy, and they go hand in hand. By the way, shameless plug, there's a QR code if you want to get more actively involved in our institute and or make a donation. But all right, so let me get into the talk. Our gross and obscene concentration of both wealth and power is wreaking havoc on our democracy and our capacities to collectively envision, establish, and implement a just and inclusive society. The ability of the extreme rich to capture government, it's anti-democratic, and it's antithetical to a just and inclusive political economy. So to be clear, I don't begrudge the wealthy because of their wealth, but rather I begrudge the readily ability to translate that wealth into political power and limit our capacities to reimagine and structure something different. Basically, economic inclusion and authentic democracy is stymied because our nation's wealth, power, resources, media, educational curricula, technological surveillance, prisons, businesses, and capital ownership, and virtually all of the institutions we have are owned, managed, and controlled by a select few billionaires, and based on this trend, not so distant trillionaires. But to fully understand democracy and how a place where we have purportedly a democracy like the US a status quo of an iterative cycle of concentration of both economic and political power may persist for so long, we would have to introduce another pillar in that relationship, and that is race or identity group stratification more broadly, the existence of some underclass stigmatized by a subaltern identity by which more dominant identity groups are willing to sacrifice vertical positioning in exchange for horizontal positioning and social status. So in other words, there's a trade-off between one's absolute well-being as well as relative well-being, and that trade-off becomes more dramatic in times of scarcity. I would argue that this is vivid in our political economic context today. So as President Donald Trump promises to make America great again, it's evident that his brand of divisive, identity stratifying politics is embedded in the economic and social fabric of our country. The president and his administration has essentially declared war on the labor movement and with vigor attacks marginalized groups in our society. I'll name some things to give some receipts. He signed executive orders and directed his administration to revoke the constitutional provision of birthright citizenship, carried out the detention and disappearance of migrant workers without due process, unilaterally declared that there are only two genders, threatened funding and called for the elimination of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility programs, threatened the funding and existence of entire government agencies and their workforces, and rolled back or eliminated collective bargaining rights for federal workers. The partisan budget reconciliation law that passed over the summer cuts Medicaid, food assistance, student loans, and other essential programs while diverting close to $4 trillion by way of our tax code to militarize immigration and customs enforcement and further tilt our disparate public investment towards a wealthy and corporate sector. We can look at the incident in Minnesota with Renee Good and see the gaslighting around that. The use of the Department of Justice and law enforcement in general, not to investigate what we saw in plain sight, but rather to go after certain political enemies and those that oppose what he may be authoritarianly trying to do. We should be reminded that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s 1967 speech, in which he identified three evils of society: racism, materialism, which we can translate into greed and poverty, and militarism, which we're seeing both domestically and internationally. Justice doesn't end at our borders. We can see the application of what he talked about 1967 to what's going on today. He talks about what happens when a dream is deferred, how that leaves citizens vulnerable. He talked about the concepts back then of white backlash. And he argued white backlash is nothing new. It's associated with eternal decay, as he described, and reverse discrimination, white backlash, they often amplify when indeed we have greater despair in society. He talked about society in 1967 being faced with choices between materialism and humanism, militarism and humanism. Last Monday demarked the national holiday to celebrate the life of and the accomplishments of Dr. King, America's most noted freedom fighter. It's not an ironic coincidence that just over a year ago, President Donald Trump was inaugurated on MLK Day. This is not simply a coincidence, but an ironic polarity of two contrasting visions for America that demands our attention. We must reckon that Donald Trump's continual electoral success lays bare our nation's fears, vulnerabilities, and divisions, and the sustained popularity that he has, here's the key word, it's a symptom, not a cause. A symptom of a bipartisan economy, Democrats and Republicans, that have failed to promote economic security and prosperity for most workers. President Trump's playbook leverages a tried and tested tool, a political and economic appeal to one's relative status. Relative status, which is often legally and socially enforced by the state, can provide individuals with a sense of psychological solace, some comfort in not being last, as well as economic advantage, some comfort in not being the first fired, vis-a-vis individuals or relative to individuals from some other group. The strategy has deep roots tracing as far back as Barry Goldwater's Southern strategy, where appeals to whiteness of Southern voters were made in a context of the relative racial gains that followed the civil rights movement led by Dr. Martin Luther King. Barry Goldwater's campaign slogan, "Return to a simpler time." Trump has refined, evolved, and amplified these appeals, offering to his voters a sense of restored status in exchange for, in transaction for their political allegiance. It's noteworthy that these appeals to relative status are not limited to race. Rather, we know race is an anchor in the U.S. context, but broadly speaking, relative status is a strategic tool used to weaponize group differences in general. Trump's campaign strategically targeted young men by positioning patriarchy. Nativity was an obvious layer in which he leveraged a point of division by which Black and Latino voters were not immune. Still, it would be intellectually and tactically a big mistake to surmise Trump's appeal as rooted in a simple ignorance, hate, or failures of our public education system or some other cultural war. Appeals to relative status are effective precisely because they tap into economic grievance, precarity, and loss. We have an economy that has systematically deprived people of the necessary economic resources they need to thrive, and which has left them vulnerable to the lure of the cheap relative identity distraction that we're seeing today. Way forward, that's why I'm here. It's not enough to talk about causes and consequences if we're not building power. I mean, let's return, let me take a quick aside and return to some other things that Dr. King left us with. In his seminal book, Where Do We Go From Here, From Chaos or Community? He talked about power. He said, power, properly understood, is nothing but the ability to achieve purpose. It is the strength required to bring about social, political, and economic change. At the end of the day, isn't this all about power? Don't people want to have agency in their lives? Power as both an input and an output. King goes on to say, what is needed is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive. I would argue we're seeing a lot of that in our society today. But he finished the phrase with, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. So there's culpability that when we had power and didn't use it, we left ourselves and our society vulnerable to what we're seeing today. But we need a keen focus on building power in a new common sense if we want to get something different. Way forward. Here's a vision. An alternative, more enlightened approach to economic and industrial policy that promotes human flourishing, civic engagement, tranquility, and authentically enables us with affirmative inclusion to be self-determining in righteous ways. We got to add that word, affirmative inclusion, because we know the default in the United States is exclusion. It's a lot of institutions that have been built on exclusion. We need an economy that centers people in the environments in which they live, one that systematically invests and directs public resources to them. In this economic vision, people are not simply viewed as labor inputs to a firm's production process, and then here's a message to the left, or consumer agents to whom resources might be redistributed to redress inequality in a charitable sense, but rather one with the conception that when properly resourced, people are the innovative, productive agents that make dynamic contributions that benefit themselves, the economy overall, and promote healthy, tranquil, safe, and inclusive environments. The best crime fighter is a good job. This means ensuring that people have the necessary economic resources to thrive. What would they be? Housing, health care, agency with regards to reproduction and family formation, right to unionize and collectively bargain, income, jobs, capital, education, and the free mobility throughout society without the threat of detention or bodily harm from a state-sanctioned terror because their identity is linked to a stigmatized group. This is not new, essentially a 21st century economic version of A. Philip Randolph and Bayard Rustin's 1965 Freedom Budget, to which Dr. King wrote the foreword when he was heading the Poor People's Campaign. I'm going to critique economics a little bit. The emergent framing of the discipline of economics as a science has been a big part of our conceptual problem. It presents an innuendo of a purity devoid of politics, use of power, and tribalism that we've constantly seen across time and space throughout human history. The economic concept of freedom and fairness grounded in individual price takers at baseline does not adequately take into account the roles of power and capital and the uneven distribution of that power and capital. Markets themselves are political and social constructions, and constructions that are influenced by that uneven distribution of power and capital. This is especially true if we're thinking about identity group disparity. From the beginning of the American project, our government has proactively shaped our economy, determining who reaps the benefits of capital flows and economic prosperity. We can look at examples of the 19th century import tariffs and infrastructure investments that nurtured a fledgling domestic industrial base with fugitive slave laws enshrining a racial structure of both work and ownership, and concurrently a U.S. government's genocidal displacement of indigenous people from their homelands, which made way for the Homestead Act, which transferred those lands to white individuals, we could say free of charge, but it was an investment. The proactive role that our government has played in determining winners and losers in our economy is undeniable. Indeed, despite the rhetoric of small or non-interventionist government, the Reagan administration ushered in an era of deregulation, union busting, government outsourcing, privatization, corporate tax cuts, and outright corporate subsidies, all things the U.S. government continually engages in, both Democrats and Republicans, at least since the 1980s. This represents a massive and active strategic shift in government resources, both political and economic resources, towards corporate interests and away from labor with industrial and economic purpose in mind. This was a very activist industrial policy that characterized the Reagan administration. As laissez-faire or non-interventionist government, if we were to characterize it at that, I think that's a gross misnomer. I know that North Carolina Budget and Tax Center is very much thinking about tax. Tax cuts are not laissez-faire. That's activist government. Taxpayers' money, when we use that terminology, that's a rhetorical device. It's public money. We store our wealth in the form of dollars, but at the end of the day, it is public money, and we use that phrase, we're talking about who is deserving and undeserving of government policy. We tax labor differently than we do capital gains. Those are normative views. Even if you value wealth as an entity by which our government should invest, we should ask for whom? Is it privileging existing wealth or creating or investing in new wealth? And why is everything not fully refundable in our tax code? What is the difference between a tax deduction and a refundable tax credit to a public ledger? The types of industrial policies I was describing are antithetical to shared human flourishing and leaves us vulnerable. Right, one big point I'm trying to get is economics, politics, and the ways in which we divide people into groups. They're not separable. They're linked together. We make a mistake if we try to analyze any of them individually or binary. Rather, it's the confluence of all three. So it's left us vulnerable to the economic context of fear, despair, and growing inequality to which authoritarian leadership exploits, both within and across nation states. A policy apparatus that's authentically centering people and the environment needs to be powered by a concept of inclusive economic rights in which we promote our collective flourishing, solidarity, and a more authentic form of freedom and self-determination, right? When we talk about human rights, it's not novel to say we should have civil rights, political rights, social rights, cultural rights. But the UN Declaration of Human Rights that came out of the atrocities of World War II, led by the First Lady, Eleanor Roosevelt, I almost forgot her name for a second, included economic rights. There was an understanding, I cited the freedom budget, but we can look at Roosevelt's 4 freedoms. There's clear understanding of the links between economics, politics, identity, and again, economic rights. I would say that not only is it inadequate to talk about political rights and civil rights without economic rights, it's a co-optation of freedom. The ability to vote when you're hungry is not freedom. All right. Let me get going because we should get to the lively conversation, and I can go on forever. Labor leaders have long understood this. For instance, A. Philip Randolph, president of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters and the vice president of AFL-CIO, explicitly linked economic rights to civil rights. Beginning as far back as the 1940s, he, along with other civil rights leaders, organized a movement to demand from government racial and economic justice with a provision of quality jobs for all people. This eventually culminated in the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Randolph's leadership brought the labor movement into the fight for civil rights, and civil rights movement into the fight for labor rights. Influenced by Randolph by the late 1960s, towards the twilight of his life, Dr. Martin Luther King, I think he made a transition. He became explicit about the essential connections between economic rights, freedom, and racial justice. King's thinking evolved to understand that integration and political rights were not enough, that for people to truly be free, it required resources and economic rights. Dr. King wrote, quote, "I'm now convinced that the simplest approach will prove to be the most effective. The solution to poverty is to abolish it directly by now in a widely discussed measure, guaranteed income." King called for a federal job guarantee, guaranteed income, and even reparations. It reflected his belief that, broadly speaking, poverty was a moral failing of the nation. And his 1968 Poor People's Campaign sought to build solidarity across racial lines, uniting poor people in the pursuit of economic security and prosperity. Tragically, and perhaps sadly, not coincidentally, King's life was cut short in 1968 while standing in solidarity with striking sanitation workers in Memphis before this phase of his vision, with an emphasis on economic rights, could be fully realized, leaving a profound legacy of unfinished work that we need to finish. Without resources, because of existing power asymmetries, individuals are largely restricted from the full benefits of economic markets. Instead, they are left vulnerable to the exploitation or whims of charity of more powerful, better resourced agents involved in transaction. Investing in our human capacities, a la the Nobel laureate economist Amartya Sen's Human Capabilities Approach framework, should be a primary purpose of government in the first instance. These investments have the added benefits of generating positive externalities and productive macroeconomic multipliers that benefit the economy overall. Further, investments in healthy and renewable environmental assets is a necessary precursor for a healthy democracy and more inclusive, productive, tranquil living, especially over time. I'm going to conclude. King famously wrote from his Birmingham jail cell that, quote, "I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's greatest stumbling block is not the white citizen's counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted," and here's the key phrase, "to order than justice." If you're faced with a choice, a perceived choice between order and justice, I say choose justice. Exerting claim on our economy requires building movements and organizations that can exact demands and conditions that truly empower all people with the resources that they need to authentically be self-determining. Dr. King and his civil rights partners had the economic foresight to know that in order to fight against the conditions that facilitates Donald Trump's strongman brand of divisive politics, we must defang that which gives it its power. And that is in an economy grounded in despair, risk, insecurity, and a growing chasm between the haves and the have-nots. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hamilton. So in this room and on this stage, we have powerful voices, organizers and actors who are pushing forward policies that better reflect the priorities of people. I want to invite our panelists to share how you each are thinking about your work and your organization's work in building an economy for all in the 2026 context. So maybe let's start with you, Braxton. Please also share a little bit about yourself. You've only been recently elected to president of the AFL-CIO, so congratulations. But already have been moving forward many important activities to build worker power, and of course have a long history of work in this state advancing economic justice and well-being for working families. So tell us a little bit about the work that you're excited about in 2026, what you see as the greatest threats and opportunities for economic well-being at the state and federal level.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. Thank you, Durham, for welcoming this Charlotte boy to the stage. I'm used to being on stages like this in Charlotte, but and Darrick, I definitely agree with you. What drove me from a major in economics was that resistance to asking why. It certainly wasn't microeconomics 101. It drove me to anthropology, so I feel you. But look, I mean, working people in North Carolina and across this country don't always agree on a lot of things. But what people do overwhelmingly agree on is that we all deserve a collective voice on the job. You know, right now, 70% of Americans approve of unions. And that number jumps up to nearly 80%, you know, when you look at those folks under the age of 34. A union card that certainly, you know, gives workers the power over their lives, right? It emboldens workers to demand and organize for a better life for themselves and their families. Union wages, healthcare, retirement plans, and just cause protections, they are life-changing.
That's right.
And those types of hard-fought benefits are proof that we are truly stronger together. You know, one of the priorities that I have is grabbing our narrative and telling our story. Something that really drove me into the labor movement and working down, staying in North Carolina after coming down here to college was the ability to work under a union contract, right? I was always told there weren't unions down here. The ability to build worker power through collective bargaining didn't exist. That simply just is not true, right? You know, there are about 125,000 dues-paying union members in North Carolina. There are over 160,000 people working under union contracts, and even more union families that are benefiting from that contract. And we're winning. We're winning. Last year, the Duke grad student unions won their first contract. Right? That's about 2,000 workers right here in Durham, right? And it's the first ever contract for grad student workers in the South. But union membership does not just build power in one job site or one office, right? Unions also increase the political participation, especially when you look at voter turnout. We're uniquely positioned and a trusted voice for all workers. You know, when we knock on the door and tell them that their union is backing a candidate who's going to fight for workers, they take that very seriously. And political scientists have found that if union density were 10 percentage points higher during the 2020 presidential election, 3.1 million to 4 million more Americans likely would have voted.
Wow.
Look, unions are an essential part of a fair and democratic society, which is why unchecked billionaires and corporations, they spend millions every year on union busting law firms, and they bankroll the re-election campaigns of lawmakers who refuse to pass legislation making it easier to organize, and we are fighting back against that. Right to work laws, attacks on public sector jobs, the funding of critical watchdog agencies like OSHA and the National Labor Relations Board, cuts to healthcare and SNAP to fund tax cuts for the rich, increasing violence from ICE. These are all symptoms of an undemocratic society that is ruled by a very small group of ultra-wealthy people. But a strong labor movement is a major piece of course correcting. And we believe that we can do that here in North Carolina. Our members care for the sick, they keep our cities clean, and they build and repair our infrastructure. They teach our kids, and they produce food and much, much more. Workers do have the power, and that will always be our most important leverage point. You know, look at what the VA nurses are doing here in Durham, what they're doing in Asheville to push back against the DOGE cuts and the Trump campaign. I beg you to look at what SEIU is doing in my home city in Charlotte, right? At the Charlotte Douglas Airport is responsible for 5% of our economic activity in the entire state.
Wow.
Yet those workers that make that entity work are sleeping in their cars and in storage units because they don't pay a living wage. SEIU presented a novel idea for North Carolina to the Charlotte City Council to get those folks to a living wage. And when city council members weren't willing to imagine with them, they ran those city council members out of office last year. That is real political power. Look, our circumstances right now are difficult, and there are horrific things that we're seeing around the country, and it certainly is gut-wrenching. but we cannot afford right now to give in, and that's not what we're doing here at the AFL-CIO. We certainly have to be defensive, but we are working to push an agenda and be on the offense. We have to use this moment as a motivator to fight harder than ever to usher in a new future. A better world is possible, and North Carolina's labor movement is committing to building it.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I'd love to turn it to you in your work at National Domestic Workers Alliance. You've been shaping the conversation about the need to fund and stabilize the state's child care system with a critical focus on the experiences of providers and families. So tell us about your work and what you're excited about in 2026 and what you're thinking about in terms of opportunities.
Awesome. Thank you. So yes, NDWA, or the National Domestic Workers Alliance, is helping to build an economy for all by centering the voices of domestic care workers. That's house cleaners, that's nannies, that's child care workers like myself, early educators, also another name, and even direct care workers whose labor supports families, communities, and broader economy, yet has long been undervalued, excluded from basic labor protections. As a national movement led by domestic workers and for domestic workers, this North Carolina chapter organizes workers to build power, develop leadership, and advance policies that raise wages, improve job quality, and strengthen the care infrastructure not only across North Carolina, but also across the nation. Our work is rooted in the belief that a healthy economy depends on care. NDWA's vision goes beyond improving conditions for individual workers. It imagines an economy of democracy grounded in justice, inequality, and interdependence, where care work is recognized as essential to work, and where working people have real voices and power. Through worker organizing, leadership development, and advocacy at the local, state, and federal levels, the NC chapter and NDWA challenges economic systems that have historically left care workers, particularly women of color and immigrant workers, behind. In 2026, the stakes are high. Working families across North Carolina, especially those with young children, continue to struggle and continue to struggle to access affordable, high-quality child care. Child care centers are not just a place where children spend their time and day to play. That's right. Child care centers are the foundation to education, where children grow emotionally, socially, and cognitively. Yet the system remains deeply underfunded. Mm-hmm. Family cannot, and this is a baby for me, you all, because I am a 20-year child care dad. So families cannot afford the true cost of care, and early educators cannot afford to live with the pay that they receive. The backbone of these programs are often earned wages that do not reflect the skills, responsibility, and impact of their work. Currently, child care workers receive an average of anywhere between $10 and $13 an hour. That is not a livable wage. And now, child care providers recently, as we know, as Border Control and ICE has came to North Carolina, child care providers are now faced with combating Border Control and ICE in their programs. At the same time, we face real threats. The expiration of the pandemic era investments has exposed how fragile the care system remains. Without sustained public investment, centers close, child care workers have left the field, and families are pushed out of the workforce, hurting the entire economy. Care workers are once again being asked to hold together a broken system without the resources and protections they need. But there is also a powerful opportunity in 2026. The pandemic showed us it is possible when the state invests in care. I'm gonna say it again. It is possible when state invests in care. Stabilization funds help keep child care centers open, improve compensation for educators, and ensure children receive the consistent quality care that families deserve and the children deserve. The North Carolina NDWA is building on those lessons by organizing care workers and families to demand long-term solutions, policies that treat care as an infrastructure, ensure living wages, and create sustainability systems that support both workers and families. By elevating workers' voices, advancing both policy reforms, and building collective power, NDWA is helping shape an economy that values care, strengthens economy, and creates dignity and opportunities for all, especially those who have been excluded for far too long. We are not the help. We make this economy work.
Thank you so much. That was great. Thank you for these important insights and for the connection you made between this idea of care and our economy. It's such an important piece that often gets forgotten when we're talking just about numbers. I wonder, Professor Hamilton, if you have any thoughts or reactions to our state context and the particular need to build worker power and center care workers in our understanding of how the economy is faring. And what are you thinking about for North Carolina in 2026?
Yeah, and do I can be loud unless you need it for taping.
Yeah, that's good.
The work you're doing and leading, I mean, you already are focused on, the tax code might be our biggest fiscal tool we have. We don't pay enough attention when we think about economic justice to the tax code. A lot of the ball game is right there. And again, the conception that taxes are a lot more than just revenue collection. It is the strategic direction of resources with industrial purpose in mind. And I'll repeat that thing, that taxpayer money framing, that's problematic in my view, because again, it's setting off who's deserving and undeserving. So that's a big one. And then, I can go with my co-panelists and just reiterate, I love, I'd say care work is industrial policy. That investments, I'm repeating things that Steph says and already, but just to highlight them, we all are going to face a need for care at some point.
That's right.
And it's not charitable. It is productive work that enables and spills over to other productive work. The capacity to go to work requires that your loved ones are cared for.
Right. Amen.
So I think a reconception of some of these things, again, is not handouts, but when we start talking about economics, these things we're calling for are investments. And then, last thing I'll just say real quick is, we can have all the great ideas in the world, but if we're not vested in building power, they won't come to fruition. Right now, a key word amongst the foundation community and I guess other people is narrative. We need narrative change. I think that's too simple. We need paradigm change. We need a new common sense, which narrative is a part of, but there's another key element, which is power. You can have the best stories in the world, you can have the truth, but if you don't have an apparatus towards power to enable those stories, that belief, you'll be limited.
Right.
So when Braxton is talking about building up organized people, organized workers to enact that power, these are some of the things that we need to think about. There's Marshall Gans talks about organized money and organized people. So where we might get a great deal of capacity is figuring out how best, don't abandon organized money, but how best to organize people to reap higher returns for this vision.
That's great. Thank you so much. So be thinking of your questions if you have them. We're going to turn to audience questions in a minute, but just one last question for the panelists. If there is one thing North Carolina policymakers can do to build an economy for all in our state, what would you have them do?
Just one thing. Well, we can repeal the right to work laws, of course.
Woo!
And absent that, we can allow public sector bargaining. That would go an incredibly long way.
Yeah.
That would be the piggy the one. As
I appreciate that.
So I love what Dr. Hamilton said earlier.
We got to de-emphasize hierarchy. Darrick.
Well, I love what Darrick said earlier when he said to combat crime is to give us income. So to combat anything right now, we need income, especially in the care economy. Income, invest in the child care. If teachers and home care workers can go to work without the stress and worries about whether their lights are going to be on when they get home or how to feed their children, then guess what? They can pour into their patients and their clients and their children. So invest in us.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. I'm going to take the moderator privilege and just add from our perspective at the Budget and Tax Center, North Carolina doesn't have a capacity problem, but a problem of will. We do have the resources to ensure that all people can thrive in our state. We just need policymakers to stop cutting taxes for the very wealthy and profitable corporation and start funding the things that make life affordable and give power to people in their everyday lives. So before, I would like to welcome up Alex Campbell, who's going to help facilitate the Q&A with the audience. He's a public policy analyst with the Budget and Tax Center who focuses on economic, climate, and disaster recovery research. So we would love to hear from you. What questions do you have for the panelists? And we can walk around and meet you if you raise your hand.
Hey y'all, happy to be here. Pleasure to be here with the panelists. I'm a Tar Heel as well, and in grad school I read some of Darrick's papers, Federal Good Jobs
It's always a
Guarantees.
great day to be a wildcat.
Also BTC, we are a proudly unionized workplace, UAW 2320. So I'm happy to be here with some labor leaders as well. Just to get us kick us off, as y'all are thinking about your questions, I had a question that I wanted to ask Dr. Hamilton. You know, you talked a lot about the need for economic rights and policy change, you know, as the chief economist at the AFL-CIO, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the role of unions in promoting not just good jobs, but systems change, policy change.
Yeah, and you know, I got to give the caveat. I'm offering my expert opinion, but don't speak for the AFL-CIO. I'd say power building through mobilizing people, and you know, if I'm offering advice to the labor movement, I'd say a couple of things. One is, in addition to organizing workers at work sites to negotiate and demand better conditions, which is critical. Some investment in power building, paradigm change, and economic vision writ large. So labor needs a vision of what the economy should be and how it should work. And there is one, so it's really collecting it and bringing it together, but some investment in that. And then the other thing I would add, Alex, is let's think about this word solidarity a little bit. Solidarity is one of the most critical tools for unions, the labor movement, but let's interrogate it in the sense that I think it needs to get beyond interest convergence. So it's not enough that we're in solidarity because we have aligned interests in a particular domain. because power and capital is very good at finding points of division, of fusion, by which they can come up with another scenario in which you're not in solidarity and exploiting that. So I would add two principles to a vision of solidarity. It is inhumane to ask anybody to give up their identity. This whole panel began with acknowledgement. So to ask people to give up the affinity to which they identify, the aesthetic, the culture, the heritage to which they identify is inhumane. It also doesn't work, because what ends up happening is the dominant identity simply prevails. The status quo isn't some melting non-identity, it resorts to the dominant identity. So I think notions of solidarity, to be sustainable, to avoid the vulnerability of power finding a cleavage within solidarity, needs to be principled that people get the right to join and be a part of the aesthetic of the group to which they choose. And then the other part I'll add is we also have to give up privilege associated with identity. And that's not an easy ask. There's vulnerability in being the first fired. There's vulnerability of not having psychological solace associated with one's identity. But for solidarity to really be widespread and sustainable, the humanity to choose your identity, as well as a ridding of the inhumanity of that identity having transactional or psychological value, has to be incorporated in our vision of solidarity.
Thank you for that. Anyone from the audience want to ask a question? Please, we'd love to hear your voices. Oh, got one over here. And please introduce yourself, too, when you ask your question.
Hi. Good evening. I'm Dr. Victoria Meiji, and I'm the founder and CEO of Akalaka. We are building a new workforce model for people with lived experience with disability in care to be actually a part of the care system. And my question is just about the definition of power. Like, what does that mean to you? And yeah, how can we practically use power to move in the right direction? Thank you.
Awesome.
So actually, I'm going to read the definition that I was talking about today in a power building group that I was part of in Charlotte. I think power is the ability to act and have influence, right? Whether that be on a system, whether that be in a workplace, whether that be in a community. I think that is, in Charlotte, in North Carolina, whether it's at the General Assembly or that's what we're fighting for, right? For us to be at the table, for workers to have an impact on the decisions that are being made.
I'll just say, for me, one thing that stands out, I was part of a cohort of advocates working across Western NC who came together to learn about power analysis and how to do power analysis. And we had this big spectrum activity where we would move across the stage to where we thought our answers were. And the question was about what do we actually want and what does power actually look like? And to me, it was very clear. Power looks like legislators, those in power, coming to us to ask us what we need in terms of policy. That's power. It's both the acting, but also we get to set the framework. We get to set the table and say what needs to happen. And that's a huge shift that we need to work towards. I feel it acutely right now as we're trying to really move the conversation, but I think that to me is how power could ideally look.
And I agree with both Braxton and Alex that power is our voice. And while Alex said have legislators come to us, I wholeheartedly agree. We are always going to them, but we have to keep in mind that they're working for us. It's our tax dollars. So we have that power to continue to inform them what our working conditions look like. And that is what power is. Us speaking up, telling our stories, and continuously telling our stories until they're tired of hearing it.
I mean, the only slight thing I'll just emphasize in the conversation is power has values too, whether they're explicitly said or not. Keep in mind that there are norms associated with that power, and it should be a goal to make sure that that power is being used for righteous purposes.
Yeah, it really goes back to that quote by King that you emphasized. Power, you got to combine it with love. Because anyone else want to ask a question? Yes.
Good evening. My name is Maria Juarez, and do we have to say where we work?
You can, but you don't have to if you don't want to.
Okay, I'll stay mysterious to you all. So I have kind of two questions. The first one, what solutions do you see around giving undocumented workers an economic power? And the second one, as like community members that you work for and that you say that you really want to emphasize your voice on, what is something that you want us to hold on to while we go through this like really bumpy ride that like is going on in outside of all of our little bubbles?
I'll go real quick. I'll do the last part of what to hold on to, because I'm faced with this every day, and we all are. We wake up in the morning to the news cycles, and it's crushing. My solace is purpose, right? And indeed, we want to get a structure that facilitates people to have purpose and a shot at achieving their purpose. Ain't that what this is all about? So the advice I'd say is win, lose, or draw. You can wake up every day and have purpose and try to achieve that.
Well, all workers have a home in our labor movement. That's I think one of the equalizers of a collectively bargained contract. If you qualify for the job, if you're working, you get treated equally and fairly. We're having this conversation right now. I have been particularly active, and we have as a state federation in combating the fascism that we're seeing in the Trump administration's, I don't even know what to really call it. It's not law enforcement. It's campaigns of terror, and it's to me an attack on one group of workers is an attack on all workers, and that's really what is happening right now, right? The Trump administration is attacking working people that are going to and from work. They're attacking the breadwinners of families and communities to further destabilize those communities, and I think it is a responsibility of us as a labor movement to speak up for those workers, regardless whether or not they're part of a union or not right now. These are tactics that have been employed throughout the history of America in so many different settings. So we are going full force in supporting all of our siblings in labor, regardless of their status.
I think this is on. Okay. Well, care work is rooted in and comes from the center. It centers Black voices and immigrant voices in NDWA. Care work comes from that, from slavery, from immigrants. We are rooted in this, and so we've always been that voice for undocumented workers, even before all of these issues with border control. As we began in 2007, our work was centered around both Black and immigrant workers who are in the care industries. And so right now, and in the past 2 years, we've been heavily supporting undocumented workers by educating those who are not undocumented, educating those who are not immigrants on how we have to continue, how our work is intersected, how our lives are intersected, and we have to continue to support each other and stand in that word Darrick mentioned earlier, stand in solidarity amongst all. And so our work is heavily around undocumented workers, and we continue to train and know your rights, train everyone, not just undocumented, train everyone in what happens if border control comes to your door, whether it's your home, whether it's your workplace. And so we continue to do that moving forward in 2026, as well as, and to your last question, I think we need to lean on our village. We need to go back to leaning on our village. And while that sounds so cliche in so many words, but our village helped us. Our village was there. So we need to continue. In this time with Mr. Trump, we're going to need our village heavily even more. So lean on each other in times of need. So that is what we're teaching, and that's how we're upholding undocumented. Sorry.
You want to add anything, Alexander, or you?
I think I would just echo what was said and maybe add at a deeper level to, I would add at a detailed level on the policy side. You know, there are a lot of policies in place that create division in our labor force and block opportunity for people. And we need to work on all of those, you know, making sure that people can safely drive to their place of work, that they can get a driver's license, that people can go to higher education or job training programs or get the certification that will get them into a career pathway and allow them to join a union. All of those things are really critical policy choices that can be made to break down barriers that have been put in place for undocumented immigrants in particular in North Carolina. I think for me, the thing that is so important to hold on to in this moment, in addition to what you all said, it's absolutely being in community with you all and our village of people who are there doing the work every day with deep purpose and deep conviction. I think it's also about being really clear that this is not inevitable, that every choice is a choice. It is not just happening because it was inevitably going to happen. And so we can choose differently, and we have to hold on to that vision we have of so much possibility, not just in our state, but in our country, to really lean into. And that keeps me going in this moment, is to keep reminding myself these are all choices, and it's not inevitable. And with power, with people, and with community, I think we can change
it. One more, or are we wrapping it up? One more question. I'm letting you do it, Danny.
There's multiple people.
We will also be here. We can stay here for a few minutes if we need to. Okay.
So I'm here, I'm here. I'm gonna have one in the back. What about three?
Okay. I love it. I love seeing everyone so excited.
Maybe take 3.
Hi, my name's Alexandria Jones, just another Alex to add to the mix here, so it's a trifecta of Alexes. My question is about the solidarity economy, and if you all are having conversations within your organizations, first of all, thank you for being here. All of these brilliant minds here that are out there doing the work, it's really, really exciting to be in a room. And I think cooperatives, ownership, that has such a long history in the South, especially where people were cut out of lots of economic opportunity. And my concern now is that a lot of times we think, well, we'll just participate in the extractive capitalist system and just get our own. And so I want to know what you all are talking about, like within your organizations, about alternative ownership models and how that intersects with the work that you're doing.
I can share a little bit about work BTC has done relatively recently, but some of the things that we've thought about is how to support the transition of ownership when a CEO is retiring, or a longtime founder, to offer first to the workers in the workplace an opportunity to form a cooperative, and what that could look like in a context where in North Carolina we know that there are a lot of CEOs who are on the verge of retiring, a lot of founding owners of companies across the state, and to lose that capacity of economic opportunity and jobs can be translated into a worker-owned cooperative. And so that's one idea. I think there's also some exciting work happening that we are not directly involved in around making sure that housing cooperatives, particularly in the sale of mobile home parks, are facilitated and supported so that tenants have the first right of refusal in mobile home parks and build communities. And there's some amazing work happening in Western NC in that area. So I think there's a lot of great examples of ways to think about alternative models of ownership. And we know at the Budget and Tax Center that it will require state level policy changes to really make that fully available across the state, but it's something that I think it's a really important point.
I think we haven't necessarily introduced alternative ownership. However, there are many, particularly in our child care realm, there are many family child care home owners and smaller centers. So right now we support them by giving them knowledge and trainings in how to maintain your business and financial literacy with the pennies that you are bringing in to just stabilize your organization, their organization and their business. But I would love to entertain that idea once, like Alex said, like once we have some stability in these sectors of work.
I think inherently in the labor movement, the idea of the union, right, is that wealth and success, corporate success, is not due to the wonderful ideas of some brilliant mind in an ivory tower, right? It's due to the fact that we own our labor, right, and we are willing to give our labor to participate in this organization to produce, goods and wealth or whatever it may be. So again, that's I think at the root of who we are and what we do, and that we should have a say in how that labor is valued and what the conditions are like in that business. But we also, I think, recognize right now as a movement that we have to get out of our silos, right? Mm-hmm. We have to partner with community and those in the communities that we exist in to support the priorities of that community. Right? It can't just be about our alphabet soup, right, of our organizations. We have to be able to wrap our arms around the issues that folks are talking about locally, whether it is about childcare, whether it is about affordable housing, whether it is about getting political change, or whatever it is. So we have to do a better job of that, and that is one of our main focuses right now.
I'll try to be quick and just say, the way I see it is markets, again, are political constructions, and communities get to determine in a political way how they want to organize transactions. But I'll extrapolate a little further and say capitalism and socialism have become straw man concepts that are used to mute conversations and are often, and frankly, are never fully practiced anywhere anyway. They're valuable in the classroom to understand what might occur if we organize in this way under these conditions. But in practice, what we're leaning into is economic rights as a baseline level of investment and resource, and then the determination if you want more cooperatives, if you want more entrepreneurship, those become local political decisions by which people get some agency in determining. But at its root, people should not be vulnerable to exploitation if they have some baseline level of resource. And the only other thing I'll add, which is fundamental to economic rights, needs to be the right to collectively bargain. There are power asymmetries, and if we don't allow workers to have the solidarity to collectively negotiate, that's not just, and there won't be fairness.
Hi, thank you so much for being here today. My name is Luis Garcia Bundiz. I'm a first-year Master's of Public Policy student at Duke University Sanford School of Public Policy. So there's any levels here. So my question to you, I really like this phrase of like, power without love is reckless and abusive, and we're really seeing that right now in Washington. And so my question then is, how can we create affirmative inclusion through interventions, community engagement, and mobilization in such tumultuous times that we're living in the society?
And Alexandra kind of alluded, actually Steph and Alexandra alluded to a time not so far ago where we had some dramatic changes. We should do a tale of two recoveries and look at the conditions and interventions of the Great Recession versus the pandemic recession. We know inflation stole the narrative and the story. And there's a lot we can say about what really caused inflation or didn't, or if we were willing to live with some inflation when we were facing the Great Plague. It's miraculous that we're not still in a deep recession today. And the policy frameworks that we're talking about, we kind of did them. We told employers that you can get a forgivable loan if you kept payroll. That's a job guarantee. We used the tax code. You didn't have to go to a welfare office, and sent trillions of dollars directly to the American people. That's guaranteed income. It was hard to get to a doctor, but if you went to the doctor, you didn't get a bill during the pandemic. We put a moratorium on foreclosure, put a moratorium on eviction, student loan forbearance. So if we need to understand, can these ideas work? We did them. It wasn't sustainable. We didn't make it sustainable because we didn't have the political apparatus. But if we want motivation of can we win, you can't just look at the economic conditions. People were in the streets in a pandemic, black, white, and otherwise, talking about Black Lives Matter, domestically and internationally. Those were conditions that helped make, somebody said it earlier, make the administration implement a lot of those policies that I think served us fairly well during a big crisis.
All right, thank you to all our speakers. Thank you to everyone who asked questions. I know there was many more questions that we didn't get to, but we are at time for our panelists. So before I call up our final speaker to bring us home, let's just give everyone a round of applause when we're done. So to close us out, I want to introduce one of our board members of North Carolina Budget and Tax Center, the Deputy Director of our close partner, North Carolina Black Alliance. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Jovita Lee.
All right, well, good evening, everybody. Good evening. So it's definitely my pleasure to be here with you all this evening. And so I know we just did, but if you could just join me one more time in thanking our keynote speaker, Darrick Hamilton, our panelists. They did an incredible job this evening. And so thank you for being here. Thank you for sacrificing your time. So again, I'm Dr. Javita Lee. I am a proud board member of the North Carolina Budget and Tax Center. I'm also the new Deputy Director for North Carolina Black Alliance. And I'm super excited to be here and to talk about what we need to do. So we've talked about the economy, we've talked about, some of the action steps. And so there's a few action steps that we can take right now. And so I would love for everybody to go ahead, start to take out your phones, start to get ready, because I'm going to have a call to action here in just a second. And so as we're moving from tonight's event, and as we think about what we need to do every day going into 2026, I hope that we are all leaving with the shared understanding that policy choices can make our economy better and life more affordable for North Carolinians, and a shared commitment to engaging in the policy process to make our elected leaders see that there is actually a better way forward. And so again, we're going to skip to that call to action, and I hope that everybody is going to join me in this. So if you have not already done it, please go ahead. Please go ahead and pull out your phone, scan the QR code, because we want everyone to sign the petition. This petition will be delivered on tax day, which is April 15th, to the North Carolina General Assembly. And we're going to call on them to stop the elimination of the corporate income tax. And if you've already signed it, share it. Share it with at least 3 folks that you know, family, friends, anyone that you know will take action right along with you. And so I'm going to give you about 5 more seconds. I want to see everybody's phone scanning the QR code, because, this is a critical time. This is a critical year. We want everyone involved. And so, of course, in addition to the petition, we also want you to sign up for real-time updates from the North Carolina Budget and Tax Center. We want you to continue to engage with us, continue to stay informed, continue to get the real-time information. The Budget and Tax Center releases incredible papers and analysis that folks really need to pay attention to and really underscore all of the work that we do in the infrastructure. So I encourage you to sign up for our real-time updates and make sure that you are staying engaged with us day in and day out. And so again, thank you so much for joining us this evening, for being a part of this community, and for connecting the dots between policy choices and the economy we all deserve. So safe travels home, stay safe this weekend with the impending weather, and we hope to see y'all really, really soon. And so thank you for all that you do.